Hello, Kevin. Welcome to the Dream Big podcast, where we bring you the real, unfiltered stories and game changing advice of the world's most inspiring entrepreneurs and innovators. I'm your host, Yukti, and I'm thrilled to have the one of and only Kevin joining us today. So, Kevin, thank you so much for craving out time to share your incredible entrepreneurial journey with our listeners. Your background is truly inspiring, and your engineering, operational leadership, and your work in advanced manufacturing. I can't wait to dive into the lessons and insights you have accumulated along the way.
Yuki, I appreciate being here. Thank you for hosting me, and I look forward to our discussion.
So I will go with a few questions to ask you. So, as an experienced technical professional who is transitioned into more strategic roles, what's your top advice for young engineers looking to grow their business and leadership skills?
I have two kids that are in college now, and it's the same advice that I've given them. The most important things for me in my career have been to one, find things that I like to do, that I'm passionate about in your field or even outside of your field. And two is really do as many on projects as you can. And what I mean by that is it's really important that if you're in a big organization, there will be opportunities to do unique projects. There'll
Mm-hmm.
be problems to be solved. There'll be initiatives, management. There'll be lots of things. So you've got to step out of your comfort zone, out of your day in, day out work, and do these things. Now, they may be difficult. They may take a lot of extra time, but if you want to grow in your entrepreneurial and your leadership skills, you've got to step out of your comfort zone and do things that are they're really challenging, really difficult, and they don't have the problems that don't have an easy answer. That's where you really grow the fastest.
What are the 2 to 3 most common mistakes you see founders make when trying to scale their startups, and how can they avoid those failures or pitfalls?
So, challenges that you might encounter or I guess mistakes in startups. So, that's an interesting question. I think you've got to know when to step into a winning project and when to step out of one that is no longer viable. And I've been through that. That's a tough call to make because you feel like, let's say you're in the middle of a project, you're in the middle of an entrepreneurship journey, and then you recognize that this isn't viable. This isn't going to be big enough for me to spend a lot of time. You got to have the courage to step out and leave. If it's no longer helping you grow or if it's no longer a viable
Mm-hmm.
opportunity, you
Mm-hmm.
got to make that call. And you're going to feel like that you put all this work in. And if you just spent one more month or one more year at it, you could make it better. But you really have to be honest with yourself and say, is it going to be big enough or am I losing time? Because for an entrepreneur, time is by far the most precious thing you have. You can
Mm-hmm.
always get expertise, you can always get more money, but if you spend too long in the wrong place, you're going to miss other opportunities. That's one. I think the other one is it's a little more nuanced. It's the same, but it's the other side of the same issue is you got to be sure you're picking an opportunity that's big enough and can grow big enough for you. I've met plenty of entrepreneurs who are, I have a friend who's developing an Amazon business, and he's really good at it. He loves what he's doing. It's also really slow, and it's been years in the making, right? That's something he does on the side, and he's happy doing it. Perfect. But if you got to pick a business venture that is going to be big enough for you, and you've got to really be honest about how it's going to grow. I think so many entrepreneurs are optimistic, and you have to be optimistic to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
But I think that you need to be really pessimistic when you're talking about financial returns. Say
Mm-hmm.
optimism that you can go solve the problem, but you got to be really pessimistic. So if you do three scenarios and it's low, medium, and high, you need to assume the low is where you're going to be. Because often it's a lot harder to get those returns than you ever expect it to be. So let's say that's my two biggest pieces of advice or errors that I see entrepreneurs make.
So, do you agree with the founders should focus on product market fit and define their key metrics and pilot their expansions and etc.? Do you also agree to these points that I'm going to say? Focusing on product market fit and defining key metrics and piloting the expansion or maybe scaling the initiatives.
So I think you're asking, are those important factors in an entrepreneur or, a new venture? Yeah, certainly they are. Your venture has to solve a problem and has to solve a problem that can be monetized. And so many great ideas can't be monetized. And I'm happy that people want to work on that, but it's just a hobby. If you can't monetize a good idea and you are unique in your space, I read this, there's a really great example of how you find these large ventures and it's kind of summed up that you understand how to solve a problem and not many other people know how to solve that same problem. It's unique knowledge that you have. That's when you really know you've got something. So when you're solving problems and everybody else knows how to do it, forget it because you're going to be overwhelmed by competition.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not solving a problem that can be monetized, forget it. You're just doing a hobby. So if you really want to build a business that is going to be large and lasting, you got to find a unique problem, and then there's got to be very few people that know how to solve that problem.
Absolutely. The next question would be, what's the single most important lesson that you have learned from your diverse career in engineering and product management and operational leadership?
Great question. I don't know if I could summarize it into one thing that our biggest things. I tell you what I've learned recently about building a management team. So
Mm-hmm.
we've got, here where I'm at now, we've got about a half dozen really solid managers. And I think one of the things that I have learned is that I as a leader will be good at a couple of things and I will be knowledgeable of a few others. And so am I good at technology? Am I good at people? Am I good at strategy? Right. And so I think that we get enamored with leaders who seem to be good at all of that. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that that's not really the case for most entrepreneurs. Most people can't be good at all strategy, execution, and interpersonal. So if you're the CEO, if you're a founder, if you're a partner, then recognize what you're good at and then build the team to fill the gaps. And I think it's hard because I think of entrepreneurs, they want to pick people that are like them, right? They end up picking people who are very similar, saying, okay, we're all really good at execution. Well, a foundational team that's got 6 or 8 people who are really good at execution are not going to have good strategy and are not going to be good at interpersonal, right? So pick a team that fills all those. Work together as a team because that team that you build, you guys will be um, you'll be fighting long into the night in battles. You're going to be solving problems that are difficult, and you're going to need to rely on each other. A team that doesn't rely on each other is not a team. So when you build your company, um, I think the most important thing with building a management team is finding that right balance of everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you have to have the perfect team with the
Hmm.
same mentality as yours.
Yep.
And then, yeah, you're good to run the whole team. So, the next question is, as a market innovator, what strategies or mindset shifts do you recommend or identifying opportunities in highly competitive or in the market, statutated markets?
Well, the entrepreneurial journeys I've been on have been look at an area that's growing. It's difficult to create a new venture in an area that's shrinking. If that segment or that product line is shrinking, um, you have to be really unique. So you get a little bit of tailwind by having a growing market. Where I'm at now in Rise, it's building materials. Building materials is really on an uptick for the last few years in terms of market volume. This is very good news. Then, as far as market, um, you have got to find that X factor that separates you from competition. You will always have competition. And I tell you about some of the things that I've done earlier in my career. We were building digital twins and earlier entrepreneurial journey that I had. And we were one of the first companies doing that. So those are software models that replicate real world behavior of equipment, right? There wasn't many companies out there doing that. And there was a lot of tailwind for that business. And there was a lot of companies that were looking for the value that we were bringing and being unique. We were one of the first to market. Um, where we're at now with Rise, we're a recycled product, which is extraordinary. And then we're filling a gap that's in this building materials market. So, so as you look at your market and what you're trying to enter, you have to look for where there isn't a competition. It honestly doesn't need to be a big market. You need to look for a market that you can eventually stand
Mhm.
out in and potentially be dominant in. But, picking, I think the worst advice that I've ever heard was a long time ago, somebody said, it's a huge market. We'll get 1% of the sales. And I think that's terrible advice. You should look for a market and a segment where you can be dominant or you can be significant in that. Narrow your audience down, narrow your market down, pick a product in there that you can be, a quarter or a third of the sales. And then you'll be very successful because you'll know that customer. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to find a customer group that likes your product, advocates for your product, and keeps coming back to you for that product.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that customer satisfaction is important for any of the companies?
I think I think customer satisfaction is that's an interesting question. You certainly have to have a product that the customers want. The
Yeah.
more unique and and like the earlier you are in
Mhm.
products and say you're introducing a new product and you're one of the first on the market. I hate to say it, but honestly, customer satisfaction is not super important because as the only game in town, you can sell an average product. Um, if you're the only product. Now, as competition comes in, that completely turns over, and you'll see that like there's all these models of early adopters. Early adopters will tolerate an inferior product because it's unique. But
Mhm.
as you grow in that audience, and it's not early adopters, it's the early minority, it's the early majority. Those customers will demand a high quality product. And then absolutely, then you have to turn around and make sure you're delivering every day the same product every day. So it really depends on where you are on your journey. An early adopter quality is okay. Middle of the audience there, you're going to have to really be on your game with customer satisfaction.
Throughout your career, you have transitioned cross-functional teams and various industries, from aviation to construction materials. How do you adapt leadership and innovation strategy?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. My aviation career transitioned pretty readily into software work I was doing, and then as I left those and then went into building materials, really it was a lot of learning to get into that. So, and I think it was a neat journey, right? It was very interesting. I love to learn. So how I get in that now, I tend to I tend to want to learn the technical side of the product first. And
Hmm.
so that's what I did when I kept moving industries. I would continue to learn the technical side. How does the product work? How is it made? How is it applied? Even before I would learn the customers. And I think that that's probably my approach, probably unique to me. If I had to do it over again, I actually think that I would focus on the customer requirements
Hmm.
before ever learning the technology side. I think that's probably probably quicker to enter the field, and then it probably guides your technical learning, if you know what I mean. So, say when I switched from aviation into, I knew those customers well, and
Hmm.
then I switched into the building materials side. I learned the technology first, but I think I should have been learning the market first because that would have guided what we make on the technology side. So anyway, so my advice is if you're going to switch industry, know the customer,
Hmm.
understand the customer, and then I think the technology becomes quite apparent, right? What actual technical solution you're trying to provide.
Yeah, absolutely. So, do you have any kind of suggestions for the youngsters or maybe Gen Zs while choosing the technology or maybe a product?
Well, as far as an entrepreneur journey, um, I think there's a lot of interest in tech solutions. I have a lot of friends who do in fintech.
Hmm.
Um, I think those are great, and I think they're needed. Between different apps. They can be very regional, very specific, and I think the barrier to entry is very low. I think that's a great entrepreneurial journey. I've always been really on the manufacturing side, so I'll kind of speak a little bit more to that. Actually, it's an interesting story. I was leaving aviation. I got into aviation because as a youngster, I always loved it. I just loved everything about it. And working in that for 12, 13 years was really, really rewarding just because I got to be so close to something I thought so much of. And even now, like, I haven't worked in aviation,
Oh,
more than 10 years, but I still read all the news, all the articles about the progress, follow it very closely just because it's so interesting. And then building materials was an interesting entry into that because I had taken up as a hobby, just a building, actually was building furniture, fine furniture. And I found that to be quite therapeutic and interesting and a good way to use my hands and practical skill, if you will. And I haven't done that for a long time, but that's how I learned kind of all the mechanics of how building materials works, how you build a house, how you build a cabinet. So that was a fun thing that I did. Um, and then it turned into, you know, some folks said, "Hey, would you like to actually make all these building materials at scale?" Well, that sounds really fun. So I jumped into that industry and have been rewarded ever since because it was fun. And so I guess you ask, what's the advice for youngsters? If you're it really is a privilege to do something you find fun. And if you're privileged enough to be able to kind of pick that, not everybody can, right? But I think if you're privileged enough to get on a journey where you can find the product and the industry fun and interesting, that just is all the more rewarding. And so that's really been a journey for me is what great and fun things are we going to do today. And when I get to talk about this stuff, you can see that I'm very passionate about what we're doing. And even here at Rise, being able to combine recycling
mm-hmm.
as a component of making building materials, which is all the more rewarding because I find that whole industry fun. Is how we could take somebody else's trash and turn it into something really, really high quality and really, really good for the customers.
Yeah. So that was really interesting response from your end. But I have a last question for you to ask is that what if a student who just passed from their bachelor's or who is totally blank to choose what kind of company I have to jump into or maybe what kind of work that I have to start as a fresher? What do you think, or maybe what kind of advice would you give if I just come and say that I don't know what to do, or maybe how am I supposed to pick?
It's good if you have lots of opportunities
Hmm.
and you really want to start working, then just pick the one that pays the most. And I've talked the whole time about finding things that are fun, but if you really can't decide, just pick the biggest salary because
Okay.
that'll actually set you up to make more money later on when you do figure out what you want to do. If you can and you have the privilege of not being able to work, then I would go see everything that I could. So if you just graduated and say you got an opportunity to take 12 months off, pick up some volunteer work somewhere. Go
Mhm.
see something that's really, really challenging. Like go to a place that you would never dream about going to and spend a few months there, learn the people. The future is already here for most of us. It's just not everywhere. And what you'll do by getting out and getting away from your comfort zone is you'll grow yourself. And then two is that you'll see things that will inspire you to come back and solve new problems. Um, take that opportunity to stretch yourself and then don't stop stretching yourself. You should never be, especially as an entrepreneur. It's not normal as an entrepreneur to be complacent.
Mhm.
So if you get complacent, you might as well just hang it up and work at a corporate job. But if you're willing to continue to stretch yourself, then take those opportunities and get out of your comfort zone and go do difficult things and go volunteer and build difficult things for to learn to learn something new. So I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for coming here today and being a part of this podcast is really important for us. Do you have any questions or anything to share?
Well, Yuki, what's your ambition? I'm curious where you want to go next.
Right now, I'm pursuing my master's
Hmm.
and also working as a full-time employee for coach as well. But my ambition is to become an entrepreneur where I'm going to be a star, or maybe I know what I'm going to produce, or maybe what am I going to work on a product, and how am I going to build that product while competing with other marketers. Like my small ambition right now. I don't know about the 5 years or maybe 10 years. What am I gonna
Hmm.
do?
Good. It sounds like in your podcast, you're taking a survey of how other people went on their journey.
Yeah,
All right, excellent. Well, this was a pleasure. I'm glad to share, uh, the journey I've been on, and good luck to you and yours. To let me know if I can ever help you down the road.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for spending so much of time with us. And then thank you once again.